Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Okay, well, let's get started. This is our fourth and final volunteer Q&A of the year for 2021. And really looking forward to diving in and having Tom address any questions that anyone has. Tom, thank you for making time to connect with us and help us on our journeys through consciousness and this physical matter reality. Tom, do you want to say anything before we start? Or?
Well, yes, I would like to say the thanks to everybody who's here. And even thanks to lots of people who aren't here. Thanks to all the people who are volunteers and who put in their time to help MBT succeed. We wouldn't succeed without you. It would, we'd be just a little speck on the map that most people would never have heard of if it weren't for our volunteers. So thank you so much for volunteering.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Yeah, and I know there's a huge army of volunteers, but it's hard to make the times work because everyone's in different time zones. So I'm happy that we're recording this and we'll be able to share it with everyone after. Okay, so the first person is Imad. Imad, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? Yeah.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Tom, and I appreciate his time, and also other volunteers. And thank you, Vanessa, for arranging the meeting. My first question is about, in fact, entropy is the basis of MBT. You have mentioned that becoming love is the purpose of life. And maybe it's the main thing which reduces our entropy. I want to know the reason why love is doing that first, and second, what are other purposes in life and what other things can reduce entropy?
Okay. Well, first, why does love reduce entropy? I guess is the first question. Well, remember, the consciousness system is an information system, and an information system lowers its, creates information by lowering its entropy. Also, that our consciousness system is not only an information system, but it's also a social system. And it became a social system when it created all of the IUOCs. So now it's this very large social system. And the IUOCs interact with each other as well as with the larger consciousness system. In a social system, the way that one lowers entropy within a social system is if the individuals in that social system cooperate and care, which is what I'm calling love. Okay? If they cooperate with each other, they care about each other, then they will optimize whatever they can do together, as opposed to what each one of them could do by themselves. If they go to the fear side, then they don't cooperate. They don't really care. They're very self-centered. And each one just does whatever that one can do. And it shouldn't take too much thinking to come to the conclusion that what a group of people can create together is much greater than what a bunch of individuals, staying individuals, can create. So therefore, it's the cooperation, the caring, the love is what reduces entropy. That's the low entropy path. That's the path to more order, more structure, more information, more significance. So that's the connection between love and low entropy. Now, this love path takes in really everything that's positive. Okay, we talk about cooperation and caring, but it's also all the positives. It's it has to do with other primarily, not self. Love has to do with other primarily, not self. So it's other-centered. That may be another way of saying it. So all those things that are on that love path, all those things that are other-centered, all those things that are not driven by fear are the things that fall to the love side. And that helps us, live together more profitably, lower the entropy of ourselves and of the system. So that's how that all goes together, Imad. And there's lots of things you can do to be on that positive side. It's not like there's just one thing to do, but this umbrella under the love side takes in everything that's positive. And there's lots of things you can do on the negative side. There's lots of ways that you can increase entropy. And we just talk about fear as being the umbrella that covers over all those things. So it's just that simple. It's not like, well, there's love and then there's this and then there's that. So that's, I think I've answered your question, but it's basically being positive and caring as opposed to being self-centered and fearful. And the fear always leads towards self-centeredness. So it's to back it up to its most general description is just love versus fear. And there's many ways to be on the fear side, and there's many ways to be on the love side. And all the ways that you can be on the fear side de-evolve you, and all the ways you can be on the love side, helps you evolve.
So is there any end to this process? I mean, this evolution process. Okay, how much love should we get? And is it infinite?
No, there is no end to the process. The process is one of evolution. Evolution is open-ended. Evolution just doesn't go up to a point and then quit. We finally maxed out, and then just stop. Evolution continues to evolve in every way that it can. And the ways that are helpful persist, and the ways that are not helpful go away. So it's an open-ended process. And until you have tried every possibility, and those possibilities, of course, keep changing and keep growing as people grow up. As we more become love, then there's more possibilities, more things we can do together. So the possibilities just keep growing as we succeed. So I think it doesn't end. There's always change. There's always things that will be changing. For us, it's not only changing in the consciousness world, but changing in our virtual reality as well. As the environment changes, then new things become useful. And maybe old things that used to be useful aren't so useful anymore. So we constantly see change, new opportunities, new ways of connecting and being and sharing. So I don't think that ends. If it does, the end point is so far away as to look like it's at infinity. It's so far away, you can't begin to see it. So I'd say, no, we do this. That's what we do. We are part of a consciousness system. And that system is persisting by evolving. And that's kind of it. So it doesn't stop. It just continues to evolve. And it should be getting, as it does evolve, it should become more, not only more knowledgeable, but more powerful as well as a system. And so, we as individuals. So one day you can look forward to a situation where most of us here on this planet are pretty well evolved. And when we get to that place, you'll find there'll be joy and happiness and positivity everywhere. And the individuals will be individually very powerful. And the collective will be even more powerful than that.
Thank you, Tom.
I can't wait for that day. When we're all happy and loving and kind and we care about each other. When do you think we'll get there?
I have no idea, but it's not anytime real soon that we will get there. Now, I'm hoping that we will actually begin to make more progress more rapidly in the next few decades, maybe this century. You know, before, if you look at kind of man's consciousness evolution from what 200,000 years ago till now, it's been a very slow improvement, but it's been very slow. It seems to take millennia, you know, to take a step. It's just slow. So fortunately, the more you understand, the easier it is to understand more. So the process accelerates. The curve of learning, you know, gets steep, you know, gets steeper and steeper. So it's a curve, it goes like this and then goes real steep. Well, I think we're right now somewhere in that knee where instead of, you know, right in there where it starts to turn and go faster. So I'm hoping that that's in our near future, you know, this century anyway. And that we're in that fast part. Hopefully. We don't know yet. There's no proof of that yet, but it looks like that's possible. All the pieces necessary to feed that and to let that happen are in place. So we could do it. It's just whether or not we have the will to do it. And we will eventually. So I think we're in very interesting times here, making the transition from a very, very slow evolution to a much more rapid evolution. But we're right at the beginning of that place where the curve starts to speed up.
Okay. And when you say the more you understand, the quicker you evolve. So the more like humans understand that we're here to care about each other and work together, the more we get that, the quicker we'll evolve.
Right. All learning's like that. You know, the more you know, the easier it is to know more. When you are in, you know, elementary school, learning's very difficult because everything's new and everything seems kind of massive, you know, big concepts that you have to wrestle with. By the time you get into graduate school, it's not like that. You can pick up ideas very quickly, particularly those general ideas. Now the challenge is not to get the bigger and bigger ideas, usually in graduate school, but it's to hone and get better and better in a smaller, you know, get more specialized, know more in a detail. But as far as the big ideas of life, you can grab those and swallow them pretty quickly. So the more you grow up, the bigger your decision space is. The more choices you have, then the richer your environment, the easier it is to learn more. So it just keeps accelerating. And though, if you look at the last 200,000 years, it's kind of hard to see acceleration. But that's because in the beginning, the acceleration is tiny. You know, when there's almost no change, almost millennia to millennia, there's very little change, but there is some. But that curve isn't a smooth curve. The curve bumps up and down. So there are better years and worse years, but we're talking about the average over the whole thing getting better. And I think we are. If you look back 300, 400, 500 years, I think you'll see that in general, people were a lot more fearful than they are now. Life was a lot harder. Life was a lot cheaper. Control, power, force was even more embedded then than it is now. So we look at it now and say, wow, it's awful. Control, power, force is everywhere. But it was even more so in the past. So we have come a long way. And it'll just keep getting better and better.
Yay, that's great news. It's just going to get better and better. Awesome. Thank you. Over to you, Doug.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Vanessa. My question's around, it's actually an extension of the last question or a slight tangent. It's around helping others, and by helping others, are you actually removing opportunities for them to grow themselves? I'm not talking about taking over their free will or removing their free will. I'm talking about if I give an analogy, it might be an easier question to answer. If you've got kids and you do, they bring home homework or whatever, sometimes it's easier to you could do their homework for them. But then you've completely removed any opportunity for them to learn, or in the case of MBT, to grow up. Is that a thing, or yeah, could you talk to that?
Sure. It's whether something's right or wrong, good or bad, depends on what it does to the long-term entropy. That's how we tell right from wrong and good for bad. We look at the entropy and see if the entropy reduces because of that action in the long run, then it's a good thing. If the entropy gets greater in the long run because of that thing we did, then it's a bad thing. It's not so much what you do as it is why you do it. So we take your example with the children. If the reason that you decide to do your children's homework for them, just because it's a nuisance, teaching them takes a lot of trouble and effort, and it's just a lot easier to get it over with if you just do it for them and then go on and do whatever it is you want to do rather than spending the time with the child. Well, that's all very self-centered. It's all about you, you see. So that's not such a good thing to do. Now, helping your child with their homework, even if you end up doing some of it for them, it may be a situation where they're very intimidated by it, where they're just terrified of not being able to learn this, or it's just so hard. And if they just watch you work some of the problems, as you explain to them how you work it, that may be a good thing. You see, so whether how you help your children with the homework isn't so much the point. It's what is your mindset? Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it for the children or is it for yourself? Is it an ego thing? If it's an ego thing, then it'll turn out badly. If it's something that you're doing out of caring and being helpful, then it'll turn out well. So morality is really based on intent, not action. Now, there is, of course, a fuzzy line there. How do you know what the low entropy thing is? And can you trick yourself? Can you say, well, I'm just trying to help my kids, when really you're just trying to shuffle your kids off and get them out of the way? So do we always know whether we're motivated by our ego and our fear, or whether we're motivated by our caring? Well, as you grow up, it becomes more and more obvious. But when you're not so grown up, or at whatever level you are, those questions are kind of difficult. You don't know, is this my ego, or am I really being helpful here? Because how do you calculate how it's going to affect entropy in the long term? Well, the way you deal with that is that you do your due diligence. What that means is you think about it. Think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Think about how it will help. And then decide on whether that help is going to be low entropy in the long run. Because your child might just delight to have you do their homework for them because they hand it in and they get a good grade on their homework. And to a child that's 6, 7, 8 years old, they don't really think too much about what am I learning. They think about, how do I get through this with the minimum amount of hassle and the maximum amount of reward? That's what they think. children are self-centered. It's all about them. Matter of fact, your amount of self-centeredness that you have is directly proportional to the amount of maturity. Or I should say inversely proportional to the amount of maturity that you have. That's how we measure maturity, by how self-centered a person is. So in any case, your children, because they are children, are quite naturally self-centered, and that growing up and gaining the maturity is something that they do for their whole life. So the children will be just as happy for you to do the homework for them, and they're not going to look at the long term because they're too self-centered to see long term. So they'd be happy if you just do the homework for them. But it's not about making them happy, is it? It's about helping them grow, helping them grow up, helping them understand, helping them become self-reliant, helping them develop confidence. So then you realize that, well, doing their homework for them is undermining their confidence. It's undermining their skills. It's undermining their understanding. So then that's not so good. So you just do your due diligence. You think about how's that going to affect the outcome, you know, how is the outcome going to be affected by your choice in the long term? And then you make your decision and you do it. So don't be afraid to make a decision or a choice because you don't know how the long-term entropy is going to fall out. Just do your homework, think about it, make your choice and do it. And then you look at how that worked. How is that working? So if you decide that what you're going to do is do your child's homework because that would make their life easier and your life easier and everybody'd be happier that way, then you have to look at that and say, well, how does that work out in the long term? And see, and it may take you a couple of years before you realize that your child's falling further and further behind because they don't really understand what they're doing because they never did the work. And school's getting harder and harder for them because they don't really understand. So then you could go back and say, oh, well, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And then you change how you do things. Now, maybe you'd have to spend extra time with them, maybe even an hour or two every evening, just helping them understand. You see? So that's how you learn. You make your best guess with due diligence, you do it, you observe the results, and then you change accordingly. Now, maybe you did exactly the right thing. And when you look at it and observe what happened, you'll say, ah, got that one right. Well, that's fine, good. If you say you got that one wrong, then you change something. So that's how we all grow up. That's how we meet life. That's how we become lower entropy, is by giving it our best shot and seeing what happens. So everything we always have to be aware of. What's the lesson? What's the lesson here? Should I have done more of the kids' homework or should I have done less of it? What's the lesson? And when you see that life is really a set of puzzles for you to solve, a bunch of lessons for you to figure out what the right answers are, then it becomes a game and becomes more fun. It's not, you know, it's not so much pressure anymore. Because you know that whether you do it right or wrong, as long as you're going to learn from it, it'll turn out okay. You'll learn. And the child will have to learn too. You know, maybe if you've always done your child's homework, by the time they get to where you're not there anymore, like they go to college and there's nobody to do their homework for them, then they have lessons to learn. And that would be a very important life lesson for a child to learn. So everybody has opportunities. So if you make mistakes, that provides other people with opportunities. If you do it right, that provides other people with opportunities. So all of life and all of our interaction is just us providing each other with opportunities to grow up. So all you have to do is be aware that everything is a lesson. Everything is a test. Everything that you do, every choice that you make is helping you either evolve or de-evolve. And then to just kind of figure out what the lesson is and how to do it well, you get better and better at that. In the beginning, you're kind of lost, but you'll get better and better at it as you grow up. And fortunately or unfortunately, depends on your viewpoint, the more you grow up, the harder your lessons are. Because once you're 20, learning the alphabet is just too easy. You can't do the simple stuff anymore. So your lessons are harder. Now, instead of arithmetic and adding and subtracting, you've got advanced calculus. And that's just the way it is in life. As you grow up, your lessons get more and more challenging. So this idea that, oh, if I just get through this lesson, it'll be clear sailing ahead. Well, once you learn that lesson, there'll be another one and another one after that. And there'll always be lessons, things for you to make choices and things to learn. And they get harder and harder in the sense that you are more capable. So the harder lesson is more appropriate for you. And as you look downstream where you've come from, it's so easy to see all the lessons that people have and the things they're doing and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. And you're going to look downstream because you've been there and done that. And a lot of that's transparent. But then when you look upstream, it's a mystery. When you look upstream, you're unsure. You don't know what the answers are or even so much what the lessons are. And it'll tend to be that way. Lessons are life. They're just circumstances that happen to you. And you have to make good choices. Choices at lower entropy. And if you do it without thinking about it, the metaphor I have is just wandering around cluelessly on the playing field because you don't know what the game is, then you're going to be a very slow learner. If you understand what we're doing here, you can be a much faster learner. You can get it and progress and see the lesson, rise to the occasion, and you start evolving much more quickly. And that also accelerates. The more you evolve, the easier it is to evolve more. And the more evolved you are, generally, the happier and more joy you find in living, that you find in life. So in the big picture, it all works out really well. Everybody's right where they need to be, right at the time they need to be there. It's just a matter of being aware of those choices and making the right decisions and the right choices. So that's kind of how it all wraps up together. So life is about choices. And those choices aren't just, things you do, they're things you are too. It's the choice of how do you react to stress? How do you react to rudeness? How do you react to, unpleasant things? Do you get angry? Do you get upset? Or do you deal with it in a positive way? So those are the kind of choices that are most meaningful. It's not so much the choice of whether you turn right or turn left at the next intersection as it is the choices you make and how you interact with other people. So your interactions with other people is where the learning is. Mostly, that's the core learning. That's where you're challenged to not make your choices out of fear and ego. So that's why it's good to be social. It's good to connect with people. It's good to interact. Because through that interaction, you have more opportunity for learning. If you just get in your hole, you hide out, you live in a cave, then your opportunities for learning are small. And you may convince yourself inside your head that you're brilliant and you're very evolved, but typically that's not true. And people don't evolve altogether. It's not like you're either completely evolved or not. You know, there may be pieces of you that are highly evolved and other pieces of you not so much. So there's some aspects of the way you deal with certain things that you may be very, very good at that. And other aspects of how you deal with things, you may be very poor at that. So your growth isn't just uniform all along, you know, in all ways. There's some places you excel and some places that you struggle. Look at those places where you struggle. Those are the places that cause you to feel negativity. Find the lesson and learn it. So that's basically, you know, life, how you approach life and succeed.
Great answer.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, Tom, you mentioned that's why you should be social. That's also why it's helpful to be in a relationship, because that's, you've even said that's where a lot of your learning comes.
Absolutely. The closer you are to someone, the more likely they are a very strong teacher of yours. So if your relationships are all very superficial, then you don't learn a whole lot from that. Most of that superficial relationship, you are interacting with your image, not with what's inside you. You're not really being sincere or being authentic. You're just saying what society expects you to say. You know, you're being polite, you're being helpful, but you don't really have much invested in it. It's those relationships that are very deep, that are very important to you. Those are the ones that offer the most learning opportunities. So yes, having people you're very close to, very connected to, is important. That's an important part. And we're driven that way. You know, that's part of, you know, how we are. Everybody's kind of pushed inside instinctually to connect with other people and to find a deeper connection with a few of those people. And if we don't have that, we kind of feel like something's missing. And we start looking for it.
Can you have a deeper connection with everybody? And you...
Well, as you grow up, your connection with everybody does deepen. Yes. But you don't have a real deep personal connection with everybody because you don't know everybody that well. In order to have a deep personal connection, you really have to be deeply involved, you know, on a day-to-day basis, pretty much. And I guess it could be done at a distance, but it's a lot harder. So it's something that requires a lot of interaction and time together. Otherwise, it just stays more and more superficial. If you're only going to see people for, you know, an hour a week, you're not going to get into anything that might be too stressful. You keep it all superficial and happy because there's no reason to go any deeper than that. Deep connections take a lot of time and effort. It's hard for them to occur at a distance for a long period of time. Not impossible, it's just more difficult. You don't learn as much. The learning is a lot slower if it's at a distance.
Victor, you're up.
Yes, so this will be a good continuation to what you have been talking about, Tom, just now, because I have been thinking about how to improve my interactions within PMR. And one thing I'm not sure about is what kind of consciousness units I should be interacting with, particularly in the context of long-term relationships, which can be romantic or otherwise. So I've prepared 3 options. One is the high quality consciousness, or at least one that is kind of serious about growing up. And, you know, when we are interacting with this kind of consciousness, we can have more meaningful interactions, we can grow together, and it tends to be also more enjoyable. But on the other hand, they tend to be few in numbers, and they tend to be kind of busy trying to save the world as well. So that's number one. And number two is the low quality consciousness, which is kind of easier to find, as you have just said. And it's also tend to be not so fun to interact with. Somehow I find it hard to be enthusiastic about that kind of interaction. And the issue is really that they have, the fear, they have insecurity, and that tends to limit the interactions that we can have. And they are somehow not willing to grow up. So I feel like my own growth will also be somewhat limited because of this. And there is the final option, which I call derived consciousness, which is a term I made up. Which is what I really mean is maybe fictional characters in a video game character could be, for example. So here, the set of possible interactions is basically limited to what is programmed in, but sometimes there can be moral choices. And I would argue that within that limited world, these characters can sometimes behave like a high quality consciousness if the creator of them is good at creating them. So yeah, I found that interacting with these can be very educational, and it seems like it's a pre-packaged experience packet for kind of growing up and having fun at the same time. So these are the three options that I have. And if I'm looking for the low entropy solution, then how should I allocate my time among these classes, / if you have more classes to suggest, then please feel free to do so.
Okay. Well, I might suggest one other grouping besides those three, and that is that people who are pretty much at about the same place you are as far as their quality of consciousness, peers, those that are struggling at about the same things you're struggling with. That peer group is usually the one that we're most drawn to. The group that is much more evolved than we are, we like to hang out with them, but we're usually on the sidelines listening, rather than being a main actor there. And those that are at the bottom, places we've already been and outgrown, well, those, like you say, are a little difficult to be with because we see the dysfunction. We're constantly aware of the dysfunction going on, and we know there isn't anything really that we can do about it. So it's not as much fun. But then the group in the middle is your peer group, people that are sort of where you are. Maybe a little more or less here and there, it's hard to tell, but they're struggling at about the same level you're struggling. And that's the group you're probably most drawn toward because you relate to them and you have similar kinds of issues and you can help each other, with those issues. You can be more helpful. So that's, I'd say, the group that you probably feel most comfortable with and can probably learn the most from is that peer group, from those that are a little bit less evolved than you and those that are a little bit more, but you're all kind of in the soup together. Because there you can be aware of the things you do. A person there can get angry and then be aware of it. Oh, I shouldn't have gotten angry like that. That's my fear, because that's something they're working on. And you, who were the one who triggered that anger, you can go, oh, I should have been more aware of how they were going to respond to that, you see. So everybody's trying to learn and grow, and you help each other out through those interactions. Whereas when it's somebody much higher or lower in their evolution than you, there's not quite so much. The learning is mostly, one directional there. It's not so much interactive as it is. So that would be another group. But another point to make here is that the lessons can be easy or hard. The lessons that are very hard have more potential for growth, but they're more difficult to learn. But if you learn them, you take a bigger step forward. The lessons that are easy, if you learn them, it's just a little tiny step forward because it's easy. So in that sense, if you were to hang out with those people who were much less evolved than you, much higher entropy, oh, that wouldn't be much fun. It'd be very difficult dealing, I'm talking about a real close personal relationship there. But the amount of learning that's available, the opportunity to grow would be much greater because you're going to have to deal positively with that negativity. And that's going to be harder to do. But if you do it, you'll learn a whole lot more. You see, so that's the other dynamic in it. When the lessons are easy, you don't learn much. On the other hand, a whole bunch of easy lessons, each might give you one little increment, another little increment, and they will build as well. So you kind of have to balance out where you are, find something that's challenging to you, but something that you think you can handle. And then you work on it and keep working on it and see how you succeed. If you feel like you're in over your head, I see what's wrong there. And I see I keep, acting and making choices out of fear, out of self-centeredness, out of self-pity or whatever. And you just don't seem to be able to get beyond it, then you're probably a little in over your head and maybe ought to find something a little easier. Or you can double down and work twice as hard at it and go for the big leap forward. These are all the kind of the choices you have as you interact with people. But for the most part, most of us are drawn to people who are about like ourselves. We're drawn to people who are about as aware as we are. We like those people who are much more aware than us because it feels good and we learn a lot just kind of hanging out with them. And while we hang out with them, we feel good. But it doesn't last long. When we're not hanging out with them, things go back to the way they were pretty quickly. A couple of weeks and we spent a weekend or a week with somebody that's a lot more grown than us. It was a wonderful week, but 2 weeks later, you're right back in that same place that you were before. It's not, it generally doesn't help you grow that much, but it does give you a glimmer of what you're working toward and where you could go, so it gives you incentive. So hanging out with the big boys and girls will give you incentive, and hanging out with the little boys and girls will give you challenge, and hanging out with those that are peers is probably most productive. So that's kind of the way I look at the growth thing and how to approach it. But life will tend to give you what you need just when you need it. Life tends to be that way. And I'd say the larger consciousness system is pretty clever about sending you challenges that are doable, but they're going to make you stretch. They're going to make you stretch out to do them, but you can do them. So you will almost always have these challenges come to you as you need them. It just seems to be the way our world works. As you progress, the next challenge just is waiting for you. Oh, you'll have a few weeks or a few months of enjoying your new knowledge and your new sense of understanding, but then that next challenge just develops right in front of you. And from my experience, it always does. That's because this is a schoolhouse. And when the children are just kind of hanging out and not learning much, the teacher finds a way to give them a lesson.
So just one clarification question. You talk about this peer group that consists of people who are more or less on the same level. I'm just wondering, how do I find those people? I mean, the MBT community has been a very good community to find in this respect. I'm wondering if there are other people, maybe, I don't know, in the offline world that I can look for, but I tend to be struggling with finding those people actually.
Yeah, well, you don't need a lot. If we're talking about now really deeper relationships, we're not talking about superficial relationships like typically the relationships, let's say, you have with people where you work. You know, when you work with people, then mostly your relationships are going to be superficial because you just want to keep the skids oiled enough that everybody can cooperate. You don't want to know each other's, deep, dark secrets because that would kind of interfere with working with people. Some you would tend to like, some you would tend to dislike and disagree with, and it's better to just keep it superficial. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about really meaningful, more in-depth relationships with people. And I'd say the way you find those people is as you interact, there'll be people you're drawn to, people you find interesting. Those are the ones. Those are your peers. Those are the people that you're connecting with. And the ones you don't find so interesting, those are probably not your peer group. Now, the more you grow up, the fewer number of people that are going to be in your peer group, because the great mass of people are down pretty much up to their eyebrows in fear. That's just kind of the way most people are. So as you evolve, there'll be fewer and fewer people in your peer group. And if you keep evolving past that, you probably won't run into people in your peer group very often. But by then, it's not so much about you growing up and learning anymore as it is about you helping others. So then that's okay. It doesn't matter. You learn as a teacher.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh, I have a lot of friends. That means I'm not very evolved, hey?
No, it doesn't mean anything at all. It means you're very social.
Oh,
You have people who are introverts and people who are extroverts. Extroverts have lots and lots of friends. And probably just a few of those are really close friends. They have lots and lots of acquaintances and a couple of close friends. And then you get people who are introverts and they don't have lots and lots of friends. They just have a few friends, and most of those are close friends. It's just a different approach.
but you're an introvert, I've heard you say, and you have lots of friends.
Yes, I'm an introvert. You should see Pamela's also an introvert. And we're so introverted that when we get invited to a party, we go to the party, we come in, we say hello to the hostess, we say hello to a few people, then we go off and stand in a corner and talk to each other. And then in about an hour, we say, I think we can leave now, right? And yeah, and then we walk out. So that's the way Pamela and I go to a party. We find an empty corner someplace, talk to each other, and then leave. So we're both introverts. And we both like each other, so we enjoy talking to each other, so that's helpful too. But no, I don't have a lot of really good friends, that I'm close to. Like I say, to be close to people, you have to spend a lot of time with them. It's not just people that you like, but it's people you spend time with. Because you can like almost everybody. At a superficial level, you don't have to deal with their fear. So you can have lots and lots of friends at a superficial level, but typically real friends that you're close to and you know each other very well and you spend a lot of time together. Those are typically only a few. You don't have a lot of those, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. And I suspect introverts and extroverts both have about the same number of those. You can only have so many of those. It takes a lot of time. You just physically don't have enough hours in a day to say have really, really deep relationship with 20 people. It just can't happen. You just don't have that. There's not enough hours in a day to put that much time into it. So usually it's 1 or 2, maybe 3, 4, just a few people that you have a really close relationship with. And those are the people that are your strongest and biggest teachers. They demand more of you.
Do you think you can build stronger, deeper relationships as opposed to the superficial ones by having intention to connect with people on a deeper level and being vulnerable and authentic rather than keeping it superficial and surface level?
Yes, absolutely. You can, just as much as time allows. You can have a deeper relationship with people just by listening more and talking less, getting to know them. It doesn't, the depth to the relationship doesn't even have to go both ways. You can have a deep relationship with somebody who only has a shallow relationship with you. It doesn't have to be symmetric.
That just reminds me, do you think we could have a deep relationship with a fictional character?
Yes, of course you can. Now, it depends on what we mean by fictional character.
Yes, something like a video game character. With
Yes.
one that has choices to make, of course.
Yeah, of course. If you are interacting with a character, let's say this is a character in a daydream of yours, somebody that's just in your mind that you connect with, you can have a very in-depth relationship with that person. Now, if in your daydream, you are just you're playing both sides. If you're playing both sides, then it's very limited because now you're talking to yourself. But if in that daydream, you let it go to the point that this other character is doing what they do on their own, you're not the puppet. You don't have your hand up behind their head and the ventriloquist that has the words coming out of their mouth. They just are however they are, even though it's in your daydream, but you give them free will, so to speak. Then these characters that you've given free will in your daydream, yes, you can have in-depth relationships with them, very meaningful relationships, even though they don't exist in this virtual reality we call physical. They exist in another virtual reality that is non-physical. But all virtual realities are equivalent in their reality. They're all real. There's nothing more real than information. You see? So the key thing there is whether or not this other entity you're having the relationship with has free will, or whether it's just a talking head that you're doing all the talking for them. But that's pretty obvious. You know that, whether you're talking to yourself or whether you're talking to somebody other than yourself. That's usually pretty clear after a few conversations. So it doesn't matter whether that only takes place in your mind or whether it takes place in this virtual reality, because this virtual reality is only taking place in your mind as well. You see, there's really no difference there. This virtual reality is just taking place in your mind. So whether it takes place in your mind from this data stream or some other data stream doesn't really matter. They're all equally real, and you can grow, you can evolve or de-evolve based on how you interact with people, no matter what virtual reality they're in, whether it's this one we call physical or what we would call non-physical. It's really irrelevant. So you can learn, say, in your dreams, things that happen in your dreams, you can learn from that. That's another virtual reality. You can learn in your meditations when you are interacting with other individuated units of consciousness in a meditation. You can learn from all of those, and they're all just as real as this one. The idea that, well, this is the real one and everything else is kind of fake is just prejudice. It's just wrong. They're all just different virtual realities. They all have different qualities and maybe different limitations, but you can learn from all of them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Vanessa. Tom, my question pertains to cryptocurrency. So you recently came out with a new offering called Tom's Park, and I understand that it's not able to be purchased using cryptocurrency. And I was hoping you could give the reason why.
Well, it's because I don't sell it. It's Amazon, you know, I create the content, but then I go to a platform to sell it. And that platform does whatever that platform does. I can't tell Amazon how they're supposed to run their business. So when you do say a pod book at Amazon, which we haven't done yet, or you do an ebook with Amazon or any other ebook platform, they have their own business model of how they do business. And they do not let their customers tell them how to run their business. So it is the way it is because those are Amazon's rules. And I have no input to that. And the audiobooks are the same because that's what they do. They're a marketing company. So they would not ask me how to market their book. They figure they know a whole lot more about marketing books than I do. And I would have to agree with them. When you're the little fish, you kind of do what the big fish tell you, or you get out of the pond.
Thank you.